The dangerous one. No one dares to face inside a cold, dark prison floating in deep space. There was a room no one wanted to enter. It was quiet there, too quiet. No guards walked near it. No one dared speak the name of the one locked inside. Behind the thick metal door was a creature so feared, even soldiers with guns refused to look at her. Her name was Kareth. She was tall, with glowing red eyes, sharp black claws, and skin that looked like it was made of stone. Her body had scars, some from battles, some from things no one dared ask about. Her voice was low, cold, and dangerous. People said she once made an entire squad of warriors scream and run with just one word. She sat in chains, but she didn't look afraid. She looked bored, angry, alone. Guards delivered her food by drone. No one ever got close. Some called her a murderer, others called her a weapon, but everyone called her one thing: dangerous. Then one day, something strange happened. The sound of metal boots echoed down the hallway. But this time it wasn't a drone, it wasn't a robot, it was a man, a human. He wore no armor, no weapons, just a simple dark jacket and quiet eyes. He stopped in front of her cell. The guards tried to stop him. "You can't go in there," one shouted. "She'll kill you," another warned. But he didn't listen. His face didn't show fear. He simply walked forward and entered the room. Kareth opened one eye. Her claws moved slightly. Her deep voice filled the air. "Everyone is afraid of me. Why aren't you afraid of me, human?" The human didn't speak right away. He set down a small metal bottle of water on the floor between them. Then he sat across from her, calm and still. "I don't see a monster," he said softly. "I see someone who's been alone for too long." Kareth blinked. No one had spoken to her like that. Not since before the war. Not since her people were taken. Her home burned. Her name twisted into something ugly. She didn't respond. She just stared. He didn't flinch. He didn't leave. He just sat there, breathing the same air, sharing her silence. After a few minutes, he stood up again. "My name is Raylan," he said. "I'll come back tomorrow." He left the bottle behind. Kareth stared at it. It had no poison, no trick, just clean, cold water. For the first time in years, she felt something she didn't expect. Curiosity. The next day, Raylan came again, and the next. Every time the guards warned him, every time he ignored them. Sometimes he talked. Sometimes he brought books, ones with simple pictures and stories from Earth. Once he brought a music player. When he played a soft human song, Kareth growled at first, but then listened. He never asked about her past, never asked about her crimes. He didn't treat her like a beast. That confused her. Deeply. She had crushed enemies. She had been hunted. She had been locked in the deepest hole in the galaxy. So why didn't he fear her? Kareth began to speak. Only short words at first. Questions, warnings. But Raylan never raised his voice, never moved back. He listened. He nodded. And slowly, she stopped trying to scare him. One day she asked, "Why do you keep coming here?" Raylan answered, "Because I think you're more than what they say. I want to know who you really are." Her chest felt tight at those words. She didn't understand the feeling. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was something else. But in the shadows beyond her cell, something darker was watching. Prison eyes. Warden eyes. People who didn't like what they saw. People who wanted Kareth to stay angry, stay dangerous, stay in chains. Raylan was doing something dangerous without knowing it. He was changing the most feared creature in the galaxy into something else. And the galaxy didn't forgive that kind of change. Kareth sat in her cell that night staring at the empty bottle of water. Her claws rested on the floor. Her thoughts were loud. Maybe the human wasn't afraid of her. Because he was the first one who ever saw her as alive. But how long would the peace last? Something was coming, and Kareth could feel it in her bones. The human who saw beyond the monster. The next time Raylan entered the prison, the guards didn't bother stopping him. They just looked away. Whispers followed him through the halls, like ghosts, quiet warnings, sharp judgments. No one understood why he kept visiting her. Some said he was foolish. Others thought he was already under her control. But Raylan knew the truth. Kareth wasn't what they believed. Inside her cold metal cell, Kareth was waiting. But something was different now. She didn't snarl. She didn't growl. Her claws were still resting on her knees. She watched, Raylan with calm, heavy eyes, not rage. Her voice came low and slow. "You don't belong here, human." Raylan sat down like before. "Maybe not," he said, "but neither do you." That silence between them was no longer tense. It was thoughtful. He pulled out something small, a fruit from Earth. She tilted her head. "What is that?" "Peach," Raylan said with a smile. "Sweet, soft. Want to try it?" Kareth narrowed her eyes. "Is this a game?" "No, it's just food." She hesitated, then reached out with one claw. She didn't eat the whole thing, just one bite. Her eyes widened. She had tasted many things in her life, ashes, smoke, blood, but never something so soft, so sweet. She didn't say thank you, but she didn't need to. Raylan saw it in her eyes. That day she asked him a question. "What is Earth like?" Raylan spoke for an hour. He told her about green trees, oceans, animals, and small houses made of wood and brick. He spoke of laughter, of old songs, of fireflies in the summer. Kareth closed her eyes while listening. For a moment she forgot about metal walls and chains. For a moment she imagined freedom. The next few days Raylan brought stories, some written, some spoken. He even showed her a small light device with moving pictures. She saw human children, playing in snow. She didn't understand what snow was, but she wanted to. Kareth, the killer. Kareth, the feared. Kareth, the monster. Was starting to feel like someone again. But not everyone was happy. In the control room, Warden Grenth watched everything. His face was like stone. His voice colder than Kareth's prison. "She is dangerous," he growled to his officers. "If she softens, she'll slip her chains. Keep the human away." But Raylan didn't stop. He returned again. This time, Kareth asked him, "Do you think monsters deserve kindness?" Raylan looked straight at her. "You're not a monster. You're just someone everyone gave up on." That word, gave up, hit her deep. She didn't speak again that day. Later, when Raylan left, she sat alone in her cell, staring at the wall. Her claws curled tight. Her heart beat differently. She hated it. She needed to stay sharp. She needed to stay cold. That's what had kept her alive. But that human, his words stayed longer than pain. She remembered things she had buried. Her sister's laugh, her father's voice, the blue sky of her homeworld before the attack, before the Empire erased her name and gave her a number, before they threw her into this cage and called her evil. She wasn't soft. She wasn't weak. But maybe she was tired of being feared. And now, because of Raylan, she began to wonder something dangerous. Could she change? Would he still come if she did? And if he stopped coming, would she care? For the first time in years, Kareth didn't feel empty. She felt seen. But in the shadows of the prison, knives were being sharpened. Because if the monster no longer scared the galaxy, the people in power might decide it was time to silence her for good. Whispers behind the walls. The prison was alive with whispers. Not from prisoners, but from guards, from officers, from silent shadows in the security rooms who watched the cameras and didn't like what they saw. Kareth was changing, and it terrified them. She no longer slammed her fists against the walls. She didn't roar when food was late. She sat still, waiting for one thing. Him, the human. Raylan. One officer said, "She's pretending, she's tricking him." Another muttered, "No, she's actually different." He's doing something no one's ever done before. The warden slammed his fist on the table. Enough. That creature is not a guest. She is a weapon, and he is her weakness. Warden Kareth had ruled this prison for 10 years. He believed in control, not hope. And hope, he saw it blooming in Kareth's cell. That was dangerous. He issued a new order. Raylan was to be watched. Every visit, every word. But Raylan didn't care. He still brought stories, he still brought food. And Kareth, though still quiet, started speaking more. One day she asked, "Why are you doing this? No one else ever stayed." He replied, "Because I don't believe in giving up on people." Her breath caught in her throat. Something moved in her chest. Something soft, unfamiliar, and frightening. That night, when the cameras were off, one guard slipped a small metal device into her cell, a recording chip. The voice on it was low, angry. "You're being watched. Don't trust the human. He's here to weaken you. They want you to beg. Don't fall for it." Kareth crushed the device in her hand. Her claws curled tight. Rage tried to rise in her again, but it felt distant, like an old enemy she didn't want to welcome back. When Raylan returned the next day, he found her quiet again. Eyes cold. She didn't greet him. She didn't ask questions. He knew something was wrong. "You heard something," he said softly. She looked away. "They say you're trying to break me." Raylan didn't move, didn't blink. "Maybe I am," he said gently, "but not in the way they think. Maybe I'm breaking the part of you they created, the part that doesn't trust, the part that only knows fear." Silence. Then she said something that made his heart stop. "They turned me into a monster so they could sleep better at night." Raylan leaned forward. "Who did?" Kareth looked at the camera on the wall. "The same people who fear you now. Because you didn't follow their rules." She was right. Raylan had broken rules by coming here, by speaking to her like a person, by listening instead of judging. That scared people more than violence ever could, because monsters were easy to cage. But people could rise. As he left that day, 2 guards followed him. Close, uncomfortable. They didn't speak, but their message was clear. Back off. Raylan didn't flinch. He walked slowly, calmly, but he knew. His time was running. Out in her cell, Kareth pressed her palm to the spot where he always sat. She whispered, "Don't leave me, human." She didn't care who heard, but she had no idea what they were planning behind the walls. Something cold was moving, something final. They had feared her as a monster, but now they feared her as a soul, and they were about to prove just how far they'd go to keep her in chains. The day she protected him, the alarms began at dawn, sharp screaming sounds that cut through the metal walls like a blade. Red lights flashed across the prison. Cells slammed shut. Guards shouted. Chaos had arrived, and it was no accident. Kareth sat up fast. Her instincts kicked in. Something was wrong, very wrong. Down the hall, doors burst open. Sirens wailed louder. Prisoners roared, chains rattled, and smoke began to fill the air. Somewhere in that madness, Kareth heard something that froze her heart. Raylan's voice. He wasn't in the safe zone. He was in the chaos. "Why is he here?" she growled. Guards were already gone. Protocol was failing. The riot was spreading. But Kareth didn't stay still. Her instincts screamed at her to move, not to survive, but to protect. She slammed her shoulder into the door, once, twice. The third time it cracked, a fourth, and the lock snapped. Her cell opened for the first time in years. She could have run. She didn't. She raced toward the fire. Raylan was in the main hall, coughing, through smoke, trying to help a wounded guard. That's when 3 inmates charged at him, wild, violent, lost to rage. He tried to speak, but they didn't listen. Then, like thunder from the stars, Kareth struck. She didn't kill, but she didn't hold back. With claws and strength that once tore ships apart, she brought them down in seconds. One hit the wall so hard the metal cracked. The others ran in terror. Raylan stared at her through the smoke. Blood on her arms, fire in her eyes. Not fearsome, powerful. She grabbed his arm. Come. Now. They ran together through the smoke. Kareth led the way, shielding him from falling debris, from blades, from fists. At one point she lifted, a broken beam with pure strength clearing the path. When they reached the lower level, they found a sealed door. Raylan leaned against it, panting. Kareth looked at him, breathing hard. You shouldn't be here, she said. I came to see you, he replied. That was foolish. He smiled through the ash. I'm human. We do that sometimes. She looked at him for a long time. Then, she did something no one ever imagined. She laughed. It was short, rough, but it was real. Then she stepped in front of him as another group approached. This time, guards, armed, angry. Step away from the human, one of them shouted. Kareth spread her arms. No. Their guns rose, fingers on triggers. But something in her stance, something in her eyes, stopped them. She wasn't the same prisoner they locked up years ago. She wasn't just muscle and claws. She had something now. Purpose. They lowered their weapons, and in the silent hallway, Raylan whispered, Why did you protect me? Kareth didn't blink. Because you reminded me who I was before the cage. That day, the news spread like wildfire through the prison systems. Kareth, the galaxy's most feared alien, had saved a human's life. Some called it a trick. Others called it the beginning of something dangerous. But one thing was now clear. She wasn't just feared anymore. She was remembered, and that made her more powerful than ever before. Who made her a monster? She lay on the cold floor, blood dripping, from a cut above her eye, breathing heavy but steady. Raylan sat beside her, pressing cloth against her wound. Around them, the prison was finally quiet. The riot had ended. Fires were out. But something far more dangerous had just begun. Raylan looked at her and asked the question that had been burning inside him for weeks. Kareth, what did they do to you? For a moment her eyes stayed on the ceiling, unblinking. Then slowly her lips moved. They didn't just lock me up, human. They erased me. Her voice was not loud, but every word hit like a hammer. I was once a protector, she said. On my planet I guarded the capital. I led our defense when the outer colonies attacked. I saved lives. Thousands. Raylan listened, silent. I fought too well, she continued. That made them nervous. My leaders feared what I could become. So when a child died during a rebel raid, they blamed me. I was the weapon that became too sharp. They needed someone to fear, someone to blame. She looked at Raylan now, her voice trembling, not with fear but with fury held for too long. They stripped my rank. They called me a killer. They showed my face on every channel and said I lost control. They put me here and said, now the galaxy is safe. Raylan's hands tightened. He felt sick. They didn't fear the monster, she said softly. They built her. The silence between them was heavy, too heavy. Raylan finally spoke. Then let them see who you really are. Kareth's jaw clenched. They don't want to see. Truth is dangerous. Truth means they were wrong. It's easier for them to leave me here, chained, silent, forgotten. Raylan stood slowly. Then let's make it harder for them. She blinked. What do you mean? He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a hidden device, a transmitter. It wasn't strong, but it could carry her words beyond these walls. I came here not just to study you, he said. I came here to uncover what they buried. Kareth sat up, staring at the transmitter in his hand like it was made of fire. You're risking everything. So are you. Her breath trembled. If I speak the truth, they will hunt me. Raylan nodded. And if you stay quiet, they win. She took the device in her hands, claws gentle, careful. For someone who had once been feared by star systems, she suddenly looked fragile, like someone carrying too many broken pieces inside. I don't know who I am anymore, she whispered. Raylan knelt beside her, his voice calm and clear. Then let the galaxy hear your story and decide for themselves. She looked into his eyes for a long moment. Then, she nodded. It was not a nod of surrender. It was not weakness. It was the start of a war with silence. And in that moment, Kareth was no longer the monster in a cell. She was a voice. A truth. A storm that had been waiting too long to rise. The question now was, how long before the galaxy tried to silence her again? The escape plan. The next morning, the prison felt colder than ever, not because of the walls or the metal floors, but because something had shifted. A storm was brewing and everyone could feel it. Raylan moved through the halls with calm steps, but his mind raced. He had watched the cameras. He had seen the guards whispering, the warden making secret calls. They knew Kareth was changing. They knew the monster they built was waking up, and that she had found her voice again. She was no longer silent. That scared them more than her claws ever had. Back in her cell, Kareth held the small transmitter tightly in her hand. It felt too small to hold so much truth. But her story was recorded now. Her real story. The pain, the betrayal, the lies. The galaxy had to hear it, but the message had to get out. And that meant one thing: escape. Raylan stood in front of her, once again. This time his voice was lower, urgent. They're going to kill you, Kareth. She didn't argue. They don't want the truth spreading, he added. The riot gave them the perfect excuse. They'll say you started it, that you're too dangerous to live. Kareth looked him dead in the eyes. Then we don't. Wait, we move. Raylan nodded. I have a way. One shot. He laid out the plan. A supply shuttle arrived every 6 days. No guards inside, just an autopilot delivery system. Kareth would need to reach the hangar at the far end of the prison. Raylan could override the security locks, but only for 5 minutes. 5 minutes. That was all they would get. Kareth stood tall, her chains long gone, her body healed. She looked different now, not softer, not weaker, but more alive. Her eyes weren't filled with rage anymore. They held fire and purpose. That night, the warden made his move. Guards surrounded her cell. Their orders were clear: silence her. Permanently. But they were too late. Kareth wasn't there. The camera feed had been looped. Raylan's trick. The guards only realized the truth when they reached her room and found it empty. Alarms blared. Lockdowns began. But Kareth was already moving through the maintenance shafts, her body squeezing through narrow paths, her memory of the prison sharper than any map. Raylan guided her from the control room, watching every camera, every hallway. At one point, a group of guards almost caught her. She froze in the shadows, barely breathing. One of them passed just inches from her. She could have attacked. She didn't. She had a mission now. Not revenge, but truth. When she reached the hangar, the shuttle's engines were already humming. Raylan met her there, sweat on his face, eyes wild with fear and hope. You made it, he said. You kept your promise, she replied. As they stepped into the shuttle, a voice rang out from the intercom. Kareth, this is Warden Grenth. Surrender, now, and we'll show mercy to the human. Kareth pressed a button on the shuttle console. No, she said calmly. You don't decide mercy anymore. The galaxy will. The engines roared. The doors sealed shut. Gunfire echoed through the hangar, but it was too late. The shuttle lifted off, breaking through the prison walls into the cold freedom of space. She was free. But more than that, she was heard. The message began transmitting seconds after launch. A signal bouncing between satellites. A voice telling the truth, raw and real. Her story, her pain, her strength. Across the stars, people began to listen. Some would believe, some would doubt. Some would fear. But none of them could ignore her now. Kareth was no longer a prisoner, she was a reckoning. Freedom, fire, and the future. The stars outside the shuttle window blinked like tiny eyes, watching, waiting. Kareth sat in silence, her breath slow, her claws resting gently on her knees. The hum of the engine faded behind her thoughts. She wasn't used to space being quiet. She wasn't used to it being hers. For the first time in years, she wasn't behind a wall. She was free. Raylan sat across from her, exhausted but alive. Cuts lined his face, and his jacket was burned at the sleeve, but his eyes were proud. "The message is still broadcasting," he said, checking the signal. "It's bouncing across 5 systems. People are already reacting." Kareth turned toward the screen. A news feed flickered to life. Then another. Images of her face appeared, not snarling, not twisted, but calm, strong, real. Her voice, played in pieces across frequencies, her story unfolding planet by planet, and then came the flames. The warden and his officers, desperate to stop the truth, had launched a strike team. Interceptors raced through space toward the shuttle. They weren't coming to capture her. They were coming to erase her. Raylan gripped the controls. "We're faster, but not for long." Kareth stood behind him. "Then we don't run. We make them listen." Raylan glanced back. "What are you thinking?" She pointed to a nearby beacon relay tower, a station used to boost transmissions across galaxies. "If we reach that tower," she said, "we amplify the signal, make it impossible to shut down." "But it's guarded," Raylan warned. Kareth nodded. "Then we break through." Minutes later, the shuttle dived toward the beacon tower. Alarms flared. Defense drones rose, but Kareth didn't flinch. She piloted with Raylan by her side, cutting through the defenses like a storm of precision and will. The shuttle crash-landed onto the platform. Sparks flew. Doors blew open. Kareth leapt out first, moving like a shadow wrapped in lightning. With hands and claws, she brought down the guards, not killing, just stopping. She wasn't the monster they remembered. She was something more dangerous, a survivor with purpose. Inside the tower, she reached the main console. Raylan jammed the system, hardwired her message, and activated the final command. Permanent broadcast activated. Her voice, truthful, trembling, brave, would now echo through every major communication hub in the galaxy. No one could silence it now, not with weapons, not with lies. Back outside, the strike ships circled above, waiting for a command to fire, but they never got it, because the people had already seen her face. They heard her story. They read the files she exposed. They saw the fear in their leaders' eyes, not fear of a monster, but of justice. Protests began on far-off worlds. Prison doors were questioned. Cases reopened. A galaxy once built on fear had been given something dangerous. Truth wrapped in a voice they had forgotten. Kareth turned to Raylan. "What now?" she asked. He smiled. "Now, we live. We build. We remind them we were never beasts." She looked to the stars, wind touching her skin for the first time without steel around her. "I thought freedom would feel like fire," she whispered, "but it feels like light." Raylan nodded. "Because you burned long enough. Now you shine." And in that quiet moment, standing on a tower high above the lies of a broken system, the galaxy's most feared alien was no longer afraid. She was heard. She was free, and she was never going back.